I'm standing outside the Navy base in the southernmost city of Israel on the Red Sea. Starting tomorrow, Russia will begin trilateral Navy exercises with Iran and China. The announcement coming amid fears Russia will invade Ukraine. Teaming up in the face of pressure. Iran, Russia, China. This is video of military exercises in 2021. Russia's Pacific Fleet says a naval group, including a missile cruiser, a large anti-submarine warship, and a tanker anchored Tuesday in Iran's only oceanic port on the Gulf of Oman. Russia has amassed 100,000 troops near the Ukrainian border. This is satellite imagery in western Russia, where troops and ground forces equipment have been deployed, even as the Kremlin denies any plan to invade. At a news conference Wednesday, President Biden said he thinks Russia will invade.
Do I think he'll test the West, test the United States and NATO? Yes, I think he will. But I think he'll pay a serious and dear price for it.
As Mr. Biden was preparing to mark his first full year in office, Vladimir Putin was hosting Iran's hardline President Ebrahim Raisi in Moscow. Sitting across a long table, the two leaders each praised the cooperation between their countries. Raisi said his administration wants to remove crippling sanctions imposed under President Trump over Iran's efforts to enrich uranium for nuclear weapons. We are in a unique situation that has created considerable cooperation between the two countries against the West's unilateralism and American power. China is also blaming the United States for difficulties renegotiating the Iran nuclear deal. China's foreign minister, meeting late last week with his Iranian counterpart, affirmed China's opposition to U.S. sanctions against Iran. Last year, the two countries signed a 25-year cooperation agreement on energy, security, and to help each other's economies. The upcoming exercises will be the second between the navies of China, Russia, and Iran. In December 2019, they held drills in the Gulf of Oman, connecting the Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf. It's a strategically important oil checkpoint through which 1/5 of all the world's oil passes. Now back to you.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. And as we heard last night, President Biden warned Vladimir Putin of a united response from the U.S. and its allies should Russia invade Ukraine. So what is Putin thinking right now?
Yeah, joining us right now to discuss, former CIA covert operations officer and the CEO of Portman Square Group, Mike Baker. Mike, what's going on?
Well, this is, first of all, I think we have to kind of carve out what happened during the press conference. And I mean,
do you want to listen to it?
Oh, no, I don't want to hear that again. I don't want to hear him talk about, if it's a minor incursion, maybe we'll think about what it is.
Yeah.
Look, that set the head spinning in Kiev for the Ukrainian government. Everybody agrees it was a real mistake on President Biden's part.
Because he made it sound like it wouldn't be a big deal.
Exactly. It's almost like he's pushing the door open for something other than a full ground campaign. Now, it's important when you're talking about what's going on with this. Anybody who's not following this all the time, you've got to understand what underpins Putin's psyche, and that is he remains very upset about the collapse of the Soviet Union, not to oversimplify it. So he wants to rebuild in some fashion the Soviet Union. He looks at the overtures between Ukraine and NATO as an existential threat. He wants that buffer zone that the Soviet Union provided, right, between the Soviet Union and the West. So he doesn't want Ukraine
to become a member of the
Now,
NATO.
The likelihood that Putin is going to, and there's a lot of debate on this between within the military and intel community. There's a number of folks who believe that he is going to invade in a sort of a traditional ground campaign. Roll the tanks in, take the territory. Occupy. And then there's others, and myself included, who don't think that's really his end game. His end game is more of a slow roll to what he wants, which is the eventual annexation of eastern Ukraine, but not through a major campaign. He's already got his troops there. He's always got proxy troops there. Look, they've been engaged in this conflict since 2014.
And that's what we mentioned earlier, because he can look back and see what the Obama administration did when they invaded and overtook Crimea, because Biden was vice president.
Right. And many of the same players in the current Biden administration were there in 2014 with Obama and Biden. And so Putin feels as if he knows these characters, right? He understands where the pushback is.
Knows what they will not do.
Yeah. Does anybody stepping back honestly believe that the U.S. and NATO are going to get into a large-scale military conflict?
No.
Right? It's not going to happen. And Putin understands that. So what does he want to do? He wants to extract some gain. And even at this point, if all he does is get them to say, we're not going to put strategic weapons into the Ukraine, which President Biden indicated he's open to that as one of the points that Putin's raised, then even if he pulls back half his troops off the border, what has he got now? He's still got 50,000 plus troops sitting there in a permanent basis. So he's going to get something out of this.
Let me ask you, have they told Blinken, we don't want all of Ukraine, we just want part of it? In fact, there are a lot of people in Ukraine that are pro-Russia. And you better get used to it and figure out some way to deal with it. And so internally in the White House and elsewhere, they have conversations that say, well, what are we going to call it? Well, we'll call it an incursion. And then that drops out.
Right, right.
Is that a scenario?
That is definitely a scenario. And I think what you're looking for is from the U.S. side, I think the Biden administration is looking at, I mean, obviously they talk about we want a diplomatic solution above all else. Well, congratulations, but that's not going to work. You're going to give something up to Putin based on the way they've played their cards so far. Look, if we wanted to stop this right now, if we wanted to stop the military adventurism, we already would have increased our sale of strategic weapons to the Ukraine, or provision of those weapons directly and through our NATO allies. We would have already put in place some of these serious economic sanctions that President Biden's talking about.
Well, we would not have reversed the sanctions under President Trump that did not allow Nord Stream 2 to be completed.
And you've just touched on the most important point that we could do.
Oil, gas.
Gas, oil prices at $85 a barrel right now, 7-year highs. That allows for Putin to engage in military adventurism.
Yeah, because everything that's
Right.
happening right now is making the oil markets nervous. We were down in the 60s before Christmas. Now we're up at 87, whatever it is.
Take the regulations off. Get back to where we were just a short time ago with energy independence. Drive the price down to $30 or $40 a barrel. And you know what? Putin can't afford what he's doing and what he's thinking about doing or possibly doing with saber rattling.
Yeah.
He's got to worry about just providing resources for his population.
I just don't know if I believe Biden will do that because he did not do it to begin with right when he took over.
I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
He's not. The administration is not going to reverse their energy policy.
And now we have Germany, floundering on whether or not they'll support sanctions to stop the Nord Stream 2 as well.
Right. And President Biden alluded to the differences within NATO. That was another amazing thing that happened during his press conference.
Yeah.
He didn't have to do any of that. He could have kept his answers tight and be very specific. This is people
want to get
pay
him out
attention
there.
to this, right? President Xi in China, as a knock-on effect, President Xi in China is watching this in relation to China's timetable towards Taiwan.
They got a longer timetable, too.
Right.
They're not in a hurry.
Yeah,
Sure.
thank you very much, Mike. Great to have you with us.
Thank
on
you very
set.
much.
After the last election, liberty-minded Americans are facing a difficult question. What do we do now? We do have a plan to stop them. This is the only plan that bypasses Biden and Congress to save the republic. Sign the petition at conventionofstates.com.